So how we can write a good thesis? You see that PhD, okay, thesis, whatever it is, PhD thesis or master thesis. One of my supervisors told that you see there is a picture, a father with a baby. Okay, PhD or master thesis is like that your baby. So every day you have to care. Okay, every day you have to care to improve your thesis like your baby. So for example, if I want to say that one day you just feed your baby, but rest of the day you are not giving anything to your baby will not grow. Like that, your master's thesis or PhD thesis, whatever it is, you have to care every single day. Okay, my question is now, what is thesis? Actually, formally, thesis is written and submitted work to a university in order to fulfill your degree, like master's or PhD. That means you have to write your work and you have to submit to the university authority. If the university authority actually are satisfied, then they will give you the degree. This is simple called thesis. Now, another thing, my respected supervisors told that during the PhD, you know that there is a word that procrastination. You must avoid the word procrastination in order to achieve your degree, whatever the master's or PhD, in successfully. Then I told that, doctor, how I can, overcome from the procrastination. Then when every single day actually, like when I met my supervisors, one of my supervisors always asked me, what did you do yesterday before coming here? Then I told doctor, in last week actually I was too busy with some other activities. I didn't focus anything. Then my supervisor told, no, this is like a procrastination. Still you have not started your thesis. Okay, my suggestion, his suggestion is to that in order to avoid the procrastination, at least you have to write every day masters and PhD 3 times. You see that at least when you will write masters and PhD in your notebook, then you will get the significance of the PhD or masters. That means thesis is like nothing. If you just be consistent, then everything is possible. That means end of the day you will get a good thesis. And remember, thesis is like your baby. You have to care every day, single day. Otherwise, you see that I have written here the GOT, graduate on time. Like UPM, I don't know other universities. In our university, we have a term that GOT, graduate on time. So if anybody wants to achieve his PhD within the particular time, that means 3 years or 3.5 years, definitely you should avoid the word procrastination. Every day you have to work consistently. This is simple thing about the thesis. But Imtiaz, can you check that I'm saying that some unnecessary dialogue box here? Okay, fine. Now it's clear. Key elements of a thesis. So there are, based on the university guidelines, actually these elements can vary. But based on the UPM experiences, actually I'm sharing my experience. Whatever the variation of the other university is like, but these 7 components, these 7 elements are essential in order to design your master's or PhD thesis. First one is introduction, first chapter definitely. And you know that this introduction chapter is one of the most difficult chapter out of these 7 chapters. Second one is literature review. Third one is actually the method, research framework and hypothesis development. Fourth chapter is methodology. Fifth chapter is analysis and findings. Sixth and seventh chapter is like discussion and conclusion. But you know that these chapters or elements depend on your supervisor. Okay, if your supervisor will tell you that no, your thesis will be 9 chapter, then you have to go for the 9 chapter. If it is said that you have to go for the 6th chapter, you have to go for the 6th chapter. Just I want to give an example, like chapter 3 and 4 can be combined, and if it is combined, you will get 6th chapter. Okay, but end of the day, you have to depend on your supervisor's mentality. What your supervisor suggests, if it is for 9 chapter, then you have to go for the 9 chapter. If it is 7 chapter, then you have to go for the 7 chapter. But these are the common elements of a thesis. So inshallah, in the next slides, actually, I will try to describe all of these things. Today's discussion session actually will be, first one is title selection, second one introduction, literature review, methods, results, discussion, implication or contributions, limitations and area for future research, abstract, and conclusion. You know that I have written here the abstract. There is a region that abstract should be in the last part, but actually from my better for our better understanding, I will try to focus the abstract part in very initial stage. Okay. So title selection. You know that to select the title is not an easy task. Okay, you have to have a very good and attractive title, and you know that to select or yes to identify or select a good title is not an easy task. I still remember that when I went to UPM, actually I was struggling to select the title. Okay, I went so many times to my supervisors, and supervisors also asked me actually, I mean, who are the researchers or who is the researcher? Like Dr. Asif said, who is the researcher? Then I also said that with due respect, Dr. I am the researcher. So it's your responsibility to find out your title. Okay, so to select the title is not an easy task. So just I will give you some clue, and if you just follow this thing, I think you will get a good title end of the day. First one title must be short, relevant to the subject matter. And you know that based on the UPM directions, when I completed my PhD in 2016 to 2019, the maximum word limit was 20 words. That means you are not allowed to exceed 20 words. For my thesis, actually for my final PhD, it was, after making all of the corrections, it was only 11 words, okay, for my PhD thesis. Then second one is attract an examiners and reader attention. That means you have to select such title that will attract the examiners and readers. Okay. Third one is it should be specific. Be specific. Last one is avoid jargon and abbreviations. It is always suggested. I have seen some of the theses, actually some of the students who try to use abbreviations in the title. It's not good. Okay. Try to avoid the abbreviations and jargon words. Okay. Now, tips how you can design or how you can actually select your title. First one, try to identify the 8 to 10 keywords by using the Googling. Okay, just you have to write the words, or I mean, in the Google, they will suggest you some keywords. So focus on 8 to 10 keywords. Second one is remove the weak keywords. That means you have to remove some weak keywords. So I will show you that what are the weak keywords. Then another one is neither too general, not too specific, Fourth one is from 3 to 6 titles. This is one of the best strategies. Try to design your titles like not 1 or 2 styles, like that 3 to 6 different titles you have to select. Okay, with the 8 or 10 key important keywords. Another last one is discuss with your supervisors and other experts to finalize the title. This is really important thing. So in the initial stage, supervisor will not give you the clue to select the title. But when you will already select 3 to 6 or 7 titles and let them see that, doctor, which title is more appropriate to you? And I have just designed my title based on these 8 or 10 keywords. So will you help me to design this a good title? Then your supervisors will help you to, select the good title. Even if your supervisors actually sometimes do not, cooperate you to select the title, then you should contact with the expert actually to finalize new title. So these are the general tips to to design your title clearly. Imtiaz, I am getting some unnecessary boxes here, so this actually is starting stop share or something. Please move this window away. I cannot understand. Okay, no problem. Okay, as earlier I mentioned that though in abstract you have to write a list of everything you have covered, but just for your better understanding, I am just describing here of this thing. Admit. What is this thing?
Now we will take care about that admission, no problem. You just
okay. But this thing is coming to me and I cannot see the slides clearly. Okay. A structured abstract. As earlier I mentioned that this part actually you have to write after completing all of the chapters. Okay. But for your better understanding, for my better understanding, I will share it here, how to get, how to write a structured abstract. And in order to get the structured abstract, you have to follow these 6 components, these 6 elements. Okay. Now, in the first part of the abstract, you have to give a short background of your issues or research. That means a short background. Within 1 or 2 lines. What is the background of this issue? What is the background of this research? The 3rd or 4th line should be the fundamental objective of your research. That means you have to mention the fundamental objective of your research. I'm not saying specific objectives. I'm just repeating that fundamental objective of your research. Then a brief methodology. That means whether it is qualitative or quantitative research. If it is quantitative, what are the statistical tools you have used? In this thing, what are the sample sizes? And from where you have collected the data. So a brief methodology you have to mention here. Then major findings and results. Okay, then you have to, after completing the methodology part and using some statistical tools, you will get some findings. This is called major findings and results. You have to mention some major findings and results in this part. And after getting the, putting the major findings and results, you have to give the, implications of your research. Remember it, implications and must be at least 2 types, like for the thesis, like theoretical implications as well as the practical implications. So both theoretical implications you have to give here. Last one is limitations and area for future research. You have to give the overall idea, actually what you didn't cover in your thesis, and how the upcoming researchers will cover these issues. So these are the 6 components you have to mention in the abstract. First one is definitely you have to give a short background, and after that you have to mention the fundamental objective, then a brief methodology including the respondents, then sampling technique, then statistical tools, all of these things. Then major findings and results you have to put here. After major findings, you should let them know to the readers or editors that implications, like theoretical implications and practical implications, you have to mention it. And last one is that limitations and area for future research. And if you can cover all of these 6 components, end of the day you will get a very good abstract. Okay, so a common question will arise that how many words are essential to be a good abstract? You know that it depends on the university guideline. For UPM, actually, in my case, it was 300 to 350. Okay, so UPM suggests you that your abstract should be within 300 to 350 words. So I think you have already understood that what are the structured abstract. And I'm repeating that if you can, cover the 6 components or 6 elements, you will get a good abstract. Now, introduction. This is one of the most difficult part, as earlier I mentioned, to design the introduction part, because all of your theses actually depend on this introduction part. So these are the common elements of introduction part. First one, introduction, background of study, problem statement, research questions, research objectives, significance of the study, definition of the construct, organization of your thesis, and last one is conclusion. So these are the common 9 elements or components or to be a strong introduction. Okay, you see that there is a red word, that is red lines, that is problem statement. And problem statement is called the heart of a research. So I will try level my best to show you how you can write a good problem statement. So next slide, I will show you that how you can design a good introduction. You know that if you follow this slide, and if you can write, if you can cover these 5 components, in fact it will be 6 components, then you will get a good introduction. And for your kind information, that when you start to write your thesis, remember it that introduction and background is not same thing. So it will totally depend on your supervisor's guidelines. So some of the supervisors may guide you, no need to go for the introduction, rather you can start with the background. For like, just I can give you my example that I wanted to write introduction, but my supervisor told that no need to write introduction because introduction is the chapter. So you can start with the background. Okay, so whatever it is, the introduction or background, you have to cover these 5 important elements. Like first one is background and motivation. This is very important thing. So you have to start your background or introduction with the previous condition or earlier condition of your research. Okay, like just I can give you an example in my own research area. As earlier Imtiaz mentioned that I'm working on HRM and psychological issues, especially for the work-family conflict on work-life balance. So you, if your research issues is work-life balance, you have to start what was the previous condition of work-life balance, when it started, and when it started, what was the condition, and you have to start from the earlier, and just as after starting, you have to come to the, current situation. Now you have to mention what is the happening now in recent, what is happening now, that means recent trends, and what are the main reasons to study. You know that this is what is happening now, and when it studies, what was the condition, that was the background. And motivation means what are the main reasons you have selected this topic. So in the introduction part, these 2 things are very, very important. That means background and motivation. Without motivation and without background, if you study your introduction, it will not good. In the second part of your introduction, you can cover the content and context of your topics. That is the rationality of your research. That means you have to mention what are your contents, what are the conditions, what are your variables, and what is the situation with respect to your topic. That means what are the current variables of in relation to your thesis or in relation to your topics. This is called content. And context means actually who are directly and indirectly involved. That means you need to know the examiners that I'm working, actually my thesis, I'm working with this particular area and these particular people, these are my respondents, and you have to give a strong justification why you have selected this area and why you have selected these people as a respondent. So these are the 2 most important things. They will ask you, examiner will ask you why you have selected this particular area, why this industry, why not others, and another thing that why you have selected these respondents, why not other respondents. So this is called context of your topics, and you have to give a very strong justification. Without giving the strong justification, unnecessary you have select some industry as well as respondents. End of the day, when you will go for the final viva, so many questions will arise. Okay, so first you have to mention the background and motivation. After that, you need to give the proper justification of your research, selection of your research variables, as well as selection of your research area and respondents. This is called rationality of your research, or we can say content and context of your research. Third one is problem statement and gaps. In the third paragraph, you can focus on problem statement and gaps. As earlier I mentioned that problem statement and gaps actually are the heart of a research. And if you have problems in the problem statement of your thesis, nothing is possible. You will not get anything. So you have to spend so much time in this part. So you have to design your problem statement and gaps very clearly. Okay, so I will let you show actually how you can identify your gaps and you can design your problem statement clearly. And after problem statement, you have to give some applications or contributions of your research, a little bit, not too many things you need to mention here. And last one is that after selecting the problem statements, after designing your problem statements and identify the gaps, now your fundamental objective will be to fill up your gaps in relation to problem statement. So in the last paragraph of the introduction, you have to give a clear idea about the fundamental objective of your thesis. Okay, so these are the 5 important components, and if you can cover these 5 important components in your thesis, I think so your introduction will be very fantastic. Like first one, background with motivation. Then you have to identify the content and context of your topics, that means rationality of your thesis with the appropriate variables and appropriate area and appropriate respondents. These are the 3 important things you need to focus with the strong justification. Third one is you must design your problem statement very clearly and identify the gaps. Last one, fourth one is applications and a little bit of contributions. Last one, in order to fill up your gaps and in relation to your problem statement, you must highlight or you must give the fundamental objective of your thesis. I think you get the idea how you can design a good introduction. Now, problem statement and gaps. So before starting this part, actually, I want to ensure you that remember it that all gaps are problems, but all problems are not gaps. Just I'm repeating again, all gaps are problems. So it's your fundamental responsibility to highlight the gaps clearly. And if you be able to identify the gaps clearly, automatically it will act as the problem statement. So I will let you show how. So my sentence was that all gaps are problems, but all problems are not gaps. So what is the definition of problem statement? Actually, no need to go for the definition, but problem statement, whatever it is, that due to the absence of this thesis or research issue, what might be the problems for an individual or for an organization? That means if you do not really focus on this particular issue, what will be the problems can arise for the individual as well as for the organization? This is simply called problem statement. And gaps actually yet to be focused. That means the issues, the areas where any researchers actually didn't touch. So just if you see the two tables here, the first table actually from this side is the problem statement, and this side actually gaps. In between, if you can follow these three things, you will be able to identify your gaps very clearly. Like problem statement, first the table, problem statement should be comprised of two main components. That means based on industry, whatever I have written here. Another one is literature gaps. So you have to, when you will design your problem statement, you have to focus on the current research area. That means industry as well as literature gaps. And why literature? You have to depend on literature, because without literature, actually, you cannot get any statistics of the problem statement. For example, I want to give an example in my research that in Bangladesh, actually 32% faculty members. You see how I get the 32% faculty members from the literature. You know that 32% faculty members actually switch their job after completing the 3 years in private universities in Bangladesh. That means they are working in private university 3 years. That means after 3 years, 32% faculty members already decided that this industry or this area is not for mine. I should switch to other industry. You know that this is a problem, because you know that turnover is not the good thing for the higher education. It's a problem. So how I can get this problem? Using the literature. So when you design the problem statement, you have to focus two important things, like industry as well as the literature. That's why you see that in industry issue, it is written that use the different market statistics. Just I give an example that 32% faculty members already switch their jobs after completing the 3 years from the private universities in Bangladesh. This is the problem. What problem? Because they are the experienced faculty members. And if they just switch from the one industry to another industry, new faculty members will come. And again, there needs to be experience, which is not good for the university. Now, another thing is that, gaps. That look at the another table. Okay, another thing is missing here. The statistics can come from various sources such as industry, report, government website, and newspaper. I think you have already got the idea how you can design your problems. That means these problems you have to based on some statistics. These statistics you can get from the literatures. Okay, so when you will design your problem statement, you have to depend on two important things. First one is industry issue. Second one is literature gaps. Another one is that when you will select the gaps, you have to depend on the current literatures. Why current literatures? I will let you clear. Another one is that classify the literature gaps according to the research question. That means what the research question you have to design. In the next slide I will let you show, but your research gap or literature gap must be related with research question, and one gap must be in one paragraph. When you will mention a one gap, it should be in one paragraph. And for PhD and master's research, 3 to 5 gaps are important. So now 3 gaps. You see that I have written here the contextual gap, content gap, theoretical gap. So how you will get your gap? Like context gap, another one is content gap, another one is theoretical gap. Okay, and if you can follow this thing, you will get 3 to 5 gaps easily. Like context gap means what are the research areas? Actually, why from where you have just started, okay, and what is the condition, and if you can find that this area has the potentiality to do the research, or we can say that less attention has been given in this particular area, okay, or that particular countries, this is called contextual gap. Okay, for example, that private universities, my research area was, that means in private universities that work-life balance has given less attention, that means there is a chance to do research, this is called contextual gap. Okay, so in the one paragraph you have to give this contextual gap with some statistics, and if you be able to give some statistics to prove that yes, still less attention has given in this area, then it is called contextual gap. And remember it, this contextual gap is also part of the problem statement. That's why in a PhD thesis or master thesis, always it is written problem statement, but gap is not written there. Okay, so problem statement actually problems plus gaps. So in PhD or master's level, your main intention will be to identify the gaps clearly. And in order to identify the gaps clearly, you have to depend these three things. Contextual, as earlier I mentioned. Then content. Content means some conditions or variables here. Okay, what are the earlier researchers covered? The variables. What are the constructs they have covered? And less attention has been given in this. In these variables. For example, all of the researchers actually focused on the direct effect. Now, the less attention has been given from the intervening effect or indirect effect. So this is also a gap. Okay, this is called content gap. That means these are the variables they covered, but these are the variables actually they didn't cover it. That's why it is called content gap. So contextual gap and content gap are not same thing. Okay, content gap means the gaps in relation to your variables, the gaps in relation to your contents or condition. That means most of the researchers earlier focuses on independent and dependent variables or other variables, but less attention has given in the intervening variables such as moderating and mediating or moderated mediating, okay, or three-way moderation. So this is the gap. You have to cover this gap. And last one is theory. Theoretical gap. You know that to identify the theoretical gap is not an easy task. So in order to identify the theoretical gap, you have to cover all of the theories already used in relation to your topics. For example, in my topics, actually 5 to 6 major theories are used. Not only the theories, but also you have to depend on the other models. Okay, so now how you can identify the theoretical gap? You have to identify the limitations of the other theories, whatever you didn't cover in your thesis, and you have to give strong justification why you have selected these 1 or 2 theories. Okay, and if you can give the strong justification that due to these limitations of other theories or other models in my thesis, I didn't use the other theories, rather I have used only these 2 or 1 theory in my thesis. This is called theoretical gap. What I have already said, this is not like easy. So I will show you that how you can identify the theoretical gap. I'm sure that you can understand that contextual gap, content gap, but let the theoretical gap I will show you. Okay, but whatever it is, in order to design the problem statement, you have to depend on these 3 things like context, content, and theory. And if you be able to identify these gaps, 3 gaps clearly, I think end of the day your problem statement will be very good. Like after selecting the problem statement, then you have to design your research questions, objective and hypothesis. Okay, and when you will design your research questions, objective and hypothesis, remember that you have to depend on your problem statement very clearly. And if your problem statement and gaps are not clear, you should not develop your research questions, objective and hypothesis, because research questions, objective and hypothesis will come from definitely your problem statement and research gap. So my request is to you that please give much time to design your problem statements clearly and try to identify the gaps clearly. So based on your gaps, you should develop your research questions, objective and hypothesis. One more thing, that research questions, objectives, and hypotheses are interrelated. Okay, that means let you show that how it is interrelated. But whatever it is, your objective, when you will design your objective, you should hello hello hello.
Yeah, okay, bye.
Okay.
I already mute.
Okay, so when you will design your objective, okay, you should, I mean, have focused on these 4 important things. First one, it must be related to your gaps and problem statement. As earlier I mentioned, this is the heart, okay, of your thesis. So when you will design your objectives, research question, you have to depend on your gaps and problem statement, and it should be specific. Okay, what I will say that specific means here that when you will design your fundamental objective, in order to achieve your fundamental objective, you may have to create some other objectives. This is called specific objectives. That means fundamental objective is one, but in order to achieve your fundamental objective, you may formulate some other supporting objectives. This supporting objective is called the specific objectives. Okay, whatever specific objective is, that you need to maintain a order and a logical sequence. That means unnecessary, you can just put your objective without following a logical sequence. For example, that if you just, your fundamental objective is to identify the intervening effect, or like moderating and mediating effect. So you cannot put first moderating and mediating effect. So before going to the moderation or mediation, you should go first to the direct effect. Okay, like independent to dependent variable, independent to mediating variable, mediating to dependent variable. That means you have to depend a order, you have to maintain a logical sequence. Okay, otherwise it will not look good. Another, when you will design your objective, you must use some action verbs, different action verbs. Like whatever, just you have 5 research objectives, and each of the time you have used to evaluate. It actually doesn't look good. So for 5 objectives, you can use 5 different action verbs. For first one, to evaluate; second one, to investigate; third one, to describe; to identify; to measure. There are so many action verbs you can collect from the internet. Okay, so it's always better to use some different action verbs for the different objectives. Okay, try to, I mean, avoid to use the similar action verbs for the all objectives. So if you can follow these 4 things, I think you will have a good objective. Other components of the introduction part for the thesis, you see that scope and significance. In the last, then definition of your construct, arrangement of your thesis, conclusion. So remember it, scope and significance. Actually, some of the students, even including me, when I went for the Viva, actually I couldn't understand what's the basic difference between scope and significance. You know that scope and significance are not same. Okay, so scope means what are the area or areas you have covered, what are the variables you have covered, what are the respondents you have covered. These are the scope of your research. And significance can be classified into 2, like practical significance, or you can say theoretical significance. So don't think that scope and significance is the same thing. Okay, so even in your thesis you can write two components, like scope of the study and significance of the study. It is always good. Otherwise sometimes it will make a conflict. Some of the students, I mean, think that scope and significance are same. Then after scope and significance, you have to define your construct very clearly. Even you can create a table. In the one part you can just write the name of your construct, other part you can give some, I mean, very precise definition, very precise concept of your construct. Then arrangement of your thesis, this is really crucial. That means in the first part what you have covered, in the second part what you are going to do, and the 3rd chapter, 4th chapter, 5th chapter, 6th chapter. That means overall design of your thesis you need to mention in the introduction part. And last one is a short conclusion, whatever you have covered in the first chapter. Okay, so if you can follow, I no need to discuss all of these things because these things are very simple. You will get the very good idea. So already fundamental elements or fundamental components I have already covered in the introduction part. The fundamental parts of the introduction was that problem statement and gap. You see, so without getting a good problem statement and gap, if you just start your thesis, I mean, then the outcome will not be good. So my request is to you that please give much time to design your problem statement and try to identify your gaps clearly. Now come to the point in the second chapter of your thesis. This is called literature review. You know that if you do not have good control over this chapter, that means in the literature review chapter, you have to struggle every single chapters, because all of the chapters actually, I mean, are related to the literature review. But you know that to design your literature review is not an easy task. So my suggestion that if you can follow these tips, then I think you will be able to design your literature review very good way. First one, when you will start your PhD, your supervisor will ask you, please download, I mean, some good articles. Then they will give you that, please download at least 50 articles, or even sometimes for PhD, 100 to 300 articles you have to download. Okay, but is it possible to read whole articles? For example, that I have collected almost first initial stage, I have already collected 300 articles. But when I started my work, I found that only 80 articles are relevant to complete my PhD. You see that how I understand that these 80 articles are more important. And for your kind information, I want to say that when you will download your articles, please try to focus on good publisher. Because if you will not be able to download the good articles, it's very difficult to find out the problems and recent trends of your thesis. So my suggestion is to, I mean, collect your article from the good and reliable sources, from the good publishers. Okay, without just unnecessary that predatory journals, predatory publishers. If you can collect your articles, it will not give you the good, I mean, picture for your thesis. Now the question is that already you have collected 300 articles. Now it's time to read of article. You know that an article usually consists of, good articles usually consist of 6,000 to even 10,000 words. So is it possible to read whole 6,000 to 10,000 words? No. If you are a good schemer, then it's possible to read an article within 30 minutes to 40 minutes. So how you can read an article within 30 minutes to 40 minutes? Definitely, you know that when you will get your article, read the abstract of the article very carefully. Why the abstract? As earlier in the first part I mentioned that usually a abstract consists of 6 important elements, like objective, a little bit of background, methodology, then implications and limitations. Okay, so if you think that your objective is a little bit of relevant to your own objective, you should go for the next step. Okay, so read the abstract very carefully. Okay, and when after completing your abstract, if you think that yes, this article is relevant to me, then you should go to the last part of the introduction. Don't read whole introduction. Because why I'm telling to go for the last part of the introduction? Because in the last part of the introduction, usually the problem statement with the fundamental objectives are given. Okay, so you have already identified the problem statement. In relation to the problem statement, you have already got the idea about the fundamental objectives. And if you find that yes, your problem statement, this problem statement and objective are a little bit of relevant to my topic, then you should go for the limitations and area for future research. So these are the 3 important elements of a particular articles. Don't read whole article. You know that when I started my PhD, actually I started to read from the end to that almost 3 hours I have already spent to read the whole article, and after 3 hours my decision is that this article is no more relevant to my thesis. You see that I have already spent 3 unnecessary hours. So in order to avoid these unnecessary times, just when you will start article, then you should read only the abstract part carefully, then last part of the introduction and limitation, area for future research. Because the limitation and future research of other researchers actually are the gaps to you. So if you think your objective, problem statement, and gaps are very much related to you, then it's okay. These articles should be separated. This article is important. You know that based on the importance, I mean, of the article, I have written, this is the fundamental article. So I have written 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 80 articles. Okay, based on the importance. And when you will read, you should write besides the article that this article is very much essential for problem statement. This article is very much essential for objective. This article is very much essential for limitation. You should give some clue. You should write some clue in the article. You know that if you can do that, and if you be able to identify that 100 to 150 good articles are enough to complete your PhD, to write your thesis. Okay, whatever I have said, that 100 to 150 good articles are not easy task, because when you will start to collect the articles, so many articles you will collect. But you know that this is another problem. Always we will try to collect the article, more recent. No, you have to stop a certain time. Otherwise, it will make delay of your PhD or master thesis. Okay, you have to stop certain time. That yes, okay, 300, that's enough. And after 300, then you should sort it out which are more important to me. Okay, if you be able to identify that yes, these 100 articles are very much relevant to my thesis, then you should start to read very carefully discussion part, I mean introduction part, methodological part, and try to identify the gaps clearly. I think you be able to get a good idea how to skim a article. Then after skimming, when you will design your literature review, you know that basically I actually followed a strategy that in my thesis I followed this pattern. Like you have to classify your literature review 3 parts, like conceptual literature review, theoretical literature review, empirical literature review. But for this thing, you have to depend on your supervisor. You know that my supervisor told me that conceptual literature review. When I participated another of the workshops, they told that you should go first the theoretical literature review. Okay, so my suggestion is that you have to depend on your supervisor, because during PhD, supervisor is everything. Okay, you have to depend on, I mean, instruction. So based on my supervisor instruction, I followed these things: conceptual literature review, theoretical review, empirical literature review. This conceptual literature review, that means you have already identified some research variables. For example, in your research, you have already identified 5 main issues or 5 main research variables. So in the initial part of the literature review, you have to proper concepts of your research variables or research issues. Theoretical part, you should read the theoretical assumptions clearly, because if you do not have the good idea about the assumptions of a theory, even you will not be able to identify the, I mean, research construct or research variable from the theory. So please read the theoretical assumptions very clearly. Okay, so after completing the theoretical assumptions, you have to identify your research variables or research issues in relation to the assumptions of a theory. So I will let you show the next slide how it is possible. And last part of the empirical literature review. Empirical literature review means that after completing the concept, giving the appropriate concept of the justification of your research variables in relation to the, I mean, theoretical assumptions, now you have to show the relationship among the research variables. For example, 5 variables or 5 issues. So you have to show the 5 relationships among the 5 research variables. For example, independent to dependent, independent to mediation, mediation to dependent, then independent to moderating, moderating to mediation. All sort of relationship you have to give in this part, empirical literature review. And in relation to the relationship, what is the outcome? What is the outcome of the research? You have to also mention in this part. Okay, so you see that you have started your literature review with the basic concept of your research variables, and it is always suggested Okay, you may disagree with me, but my suggestion is that you have to start with your dependent variable first. Okay, your outcome variable first, then independent variables. Okay, you have to start with your outcome variable or dependent variable, then the other independent variables. Okay, the same thing in the empirical literature review, independent to dependent first, then other intervening variables. Okay, so now if you start your conceptual thing in the first part, then in relation to the concept, you just try to make a relationship whether your variables are relating to theoretical assumptions or not. This is the theoretical literature review. And after completing the theoretical literature review, you have to show the relationship among the research variables. I think you got the idea. And if you just follow this thing, I think your literature review will be a good, you can design your literature review in a good way. Theory and frameworks. Okay, theory and frameworks. This is really, really important. Okay, so what is theory? What is frameworks? And before going to this thing, actually theory is nothing. As earlier I mentioned that with the assumptions of your used theories, okay, or theory, you have to identify your research constructs or your research components or your research issues in relation to the assumptions of your used theories. This is the simple thing about the theory or theories. But framework, when you will be able to identify your research components or issues, or we can say research variable, you have to draw a pictorial viewpoint. That means in a framework, you have to give a pictorial framework, then in the framework, all of the research variables are available there. That means when after using the theoretical assumptions, your fundamental task will be to identify the variables. So based on the variables or identified variables, you have to design a framework. Sorry. Hello. Hello.
You should continue, please.
Yeah.
It's outside.
Okay.
Already mute.
Okay. So based on your research variables, actually when you will design your framework, this is simply called framework. So framework means the pictorial viewpoint, and using the assumptions of theory, when you will be able to identify the variables in relation to the assumption, this is called theory. But you know that based on the theory, there are three things. You need to very careful about this thing. Number one, so based on the theory, I'm repeating, based on the role of the theory, you can get three types of research. Number one, inductive research, deductive research, and abductive research. You see that inductive, deductive, and abductive research. Inductive usually means the qualitative research. You see, inductive means the qualitative research. Deductive means usually, usually quantitative research, and this abductive means actually the mixed method sometimes. You see, so actually, as it is not methodological part, so I'm not, saying details about this thing. So it's a little bit of methodological part. You know that in the methodological part there are three types: inductive, deductive, and abductive research. Whatever it is. So when it is inductive research, you have to identify a case, you have to identify an issue, and try to formulate a theory. This is purely qualitative. And deductive research means already theory is established, and based on the assumptions, you have already identified some variables. Okay, this is called actually deductive research. And abductive research actually is not purely like mixed method. It's like whatever you have found after using whatever inductive or deductive, you should try to make it generalize, okay, in relation to the real world. This is called abductive research. But in masters and PhD, usually we either inductive research or deductive research. Okay, I collected it from the doctor's CUM. Actually, she is one of the professors, associate professor in UPM. Okay. Theories used. I have to fill up the previous gaps and models. As earlier I mentioned that I will show you that how you can identify the theoretical gap. You see, first you should not go for this side. First you should go for the tips and reminders. Okay, how you can, how you can use your theories to identify your gaps on problems. Okay, number one, present the theory in a diagram format and to highlight the important constructs, factors and variables. Then first, what she said, Dr. Steele said that present the theory in a diagram format. I have already prepared two diagrams here, so I will let you show. Second one is that briefly explain how the theory hold the main variables in your framework. Okay, now come to the point. Based on these two important tips, actually I have designed my theoretical framework. You see that what she said first, that present the theory in a diagram. I have prepared two diagrams and highlight the important constructs. These were my construct: work family conflict, family work conflict, and well-being also. Okay, then this is my independent variable, this is my dependent variable. So already based on hard instructions or tips, I have already covered this thing. Okay, now how I have designed, how I got these variables from the theories. In order to get the variables or constructs, you have to depend on the assumptions of theories. I have used two theories, like work family border theory, another one is conservation of resources theory. Okay, so work family border theory, the assumptions of work family border theory tells me that, okay, work family conflict and family work conflict, even well-being is possible. That means these three constructs or these three variables I have already found using work family border theory. Now come to the point. The examiner will ask you that if all of your variables already covered by a single theory, why you need to use the other theories? Okay, this you have to be a very good justification. You see that this is my already direct effect. So in order to identify the direct effect, I have used only one theory, that is work family border theory. But in my thesis or in my research work, there were some other variables like moderating variable and mediating variables. Okay, and for moderating and mediating variables, I have to depend on other theories like that conservation of resource theory. So using the assumptions of the conservation of resource theory, actually I got work family balance and work family supports and well-being. You know that work family balance, work family supports and well-being are the resources. Okay, so using the conservation of resources theory, I got these three resources. So now I have used these two theories. Now your fundamental objective is to make these two theories into a single framework, because in a PhD thesis or master thesis, it is not allowed to use different type of frameworks. Your framework should be one. Okay, but your theory can be different, or your theories can be more than one. Okay, now the next slide, actually my objective will be to combine these two theories into a single slide. You see, into a single slide. Now this slide, actually this framework is called theoretical framework. When you will write your PhD or master thesis, you can focus on two types of frameworks, like theoretical framework, another one is research framework. But when you will write only the good paper or papers, then you should not use the theoretical framework. Rather, you can directly go for the research framework. Now, if you critically look at this theoretical framework, you see that these my two independent variables. Another one is that well-being independent variable. So this thing I got from the work family border theory. Another work family balance, work family sports, I use function of resource theory. So when the examiners will ask you that how you can identify your research variables and research issues using theory, then you should clear that the assumptions of work family border theory says that these are the three components, and the assumptions of conservation resource theory says that these are the two important resources that are related to another resource that is called well-being. So it's very clear. That means this is called theoretical model, or we can say theoretical framework. Now research framework. Okay, so what's the basic difference between the theoretical framework and research framework? Actually, it's very simple. Theoretical framework usually put into the literature review part. I'm repeating, theoretical framework usually put into the literature review part, but just it depend on your supervisor's guidelines. If your supervisor said that no, it should be go for the third chapter and methodological part, you can do it. Okay, like research framework of the hypothesis. You know that if the examiners or your supervisor tell that research framework and hypothesis development can be a separate chapter, you have to do it. You have to do it. In the initial stage, when I submitted my thesis, actually this research framework and hypothesis development was the part of methodology. But my external examiner gave that, okay, it will be a better thesis if it is happen that your theory, research framework and hypothesis development is a separate chapter. Okay, whatever it is, research framework is usually when you will put your hypothesis in relation to your problem statement and gaps in a framework. This is called a research framework. You have seen that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever it is, you may get 8, 9, 10, 11 hypotheses. Okay, but in my thesis, actually in my research work, it was 7 hypotheses. But when you will develop your hypothesis, please try to follow the directions. In my research work and my thesis, I did a mistake. I wrote only that work-family conflict has significant effect on well-being. Then my examiner asked me whether it is positive effect or negative effect. You see that you must identify the direction, try to follow the direction, whether it has a positive impact or positive relationship. Thus, that means whether independent variable has the positive relationship with dependent variable or not, or negative relationship. Sometimes research variable can be positive or negative relationship. So when you will formulate your hypothesis, you should try to identify the direction, either positive relationship or negative relationship, or positive effect or negative effect. And another one is don't include the word significant, because when you will be able to prove that whether your result is significant or not, then you have the right to use the significant. But during the hypothesis formulation, it is always better not to put the word significant. Like that, I have just given an example that work to family conflict has negative effect on well-being. Okay, don't try to put that work to family conflict has significant negative effect on well-being. No, you can just write down that work to family conflict has negative effect on well-being. But my request to you that you have to depend on the mentality of your supervisor. If your supervisor says that you have to give the word significant here, you must give the word significant here. But my strategy is that I didn't put the word significant. I put actually in my thesis, but my examiners, especially the external examiner, asked me to delete the word significant. Rather, they have suggested that please put the direction of your hypothesis. So I think you have got the idea about research framework. When you just scratch your framework with the hypothesis in relation to your problem statement and gaps, this is simply called research framework. Major components of a methodology. We have already finished the literature review. Okay, then major components of a methodology. This is really crucial. Okay, so when you will start your components, start in the third chapter or fourth chapter of the methodology, just these are the major components you need to mention here. So you have to start your methodology with the research paradigm. Okay, research paradigm is nothing, it's like that the combination of axiology, ontology, epistemology, methodology, methods, and source. Just if you read this slide, actually you will get the clear idea about this thing. But when your ontology and epistemology will clear, that will guide you to go for the methodology, because ontology and epistemology will select you the research approach, whether it will be inductive approach. On the inductive deductive approach, you should have to select either it will be qualitative research and quantitative research. When you will select quantitative research, what are the methods you have used? This is called methods. And last one is sources of data. Okay, like whether it is primary or secondary data. So this you have to starting point. Then research design, then population, sample size determination, sampling technique, data collection, adopting measurement or instrument scale, pre-test and pilot test. So I am just giving a clue about just emphasizing on pre-test and pilot test. Don't think that pre-test and pilot test is not same. Okay, so there is a controversial issue that whether pre-test and pilot test is applicable for qualitative or quantitative research. You know that pre-test can be both, whether it is qualitative research and quantitative research, no problem at least. But pilot test usually do for the quantitative research. So when you will do pre-test and pilot test, these are really important. So before finalize your questionnaire, you have to depend on pre-test and pilot test. And if you do not follow the pre-test and pilot test, you have to struggle a lot. Just I want to give an example. During my data collection, actually, when I collected my data using pilot test, actually the language of my questionnaire was in English. And you know that the reliability of that questionnaire was too low. Then I discussed with my supervisor, then what is the problem, because my reliability is too poor. Then one of my supervisors actually asked me to convert the English language to Bangla language, okay, my own language. So when I converted my own language and I dispersed the questionnaire again to the respondents, and I just put in SPSS, and I found it's a very good reliability. Okay, so this pilot test or pre-test will give you the idea to design your questionnaire very clearly. So these are the major components of methodology. As actually you know that in order to complete this slide, only this slide, 2 or 3 hours are essential in webinar, like a methodology webinar. So I have to finish so many things. So what time is it now? Already 8:22. Okay, so I should skip this thing. So these are the major components of the methodology. So inshallah, if we have any plan to arrange the webinar like the methodology, I will try to cover all of this thing very clearly. Okay, so but you have to, I mean, cover all of this thing in order to design your methodology chapter. This was my methodology during my proposal defense. Comprehensive, everything you have to, like research approach, I have selected the deductive approach, justification. Okay, research method, why I have used quantitative method, research design, conclusive research, descriptive, everything you have to give the justification. Without giving the justification, if you unnecessarily select an approach, a methodology, then it has no value. Okay, just I have given an example here. And this sampling technique, you know that there are two major sampling techniques, like probability sampling and non-probability sampling. Okay, whatever it is, probability sampling or non-probability sampling technique, you must have a very good justification why you have used this this sampling technique. Just I used the convenience sampling in my PhD thesis. So the examiner asked why convenience sampling, because convenience sampling is the non-probability sampling, and non-probability sampling usually for the qualitative research. You have done the quantitative research, but you have used the convenience sampling. But you know that I have given very good 3 or 4 justification. The examiners are very happy. That's why even they didn't ask anything about my methodology chapter. Okay, so whatever you are using, the random sampling, stratified sampling, snowball sampling, you must have very, very good justification. Okay, now scale and measurement of the questionnaire. This is really, really crucial. Okay, just few days ago, maybe 2 or 3 days ago, actually I got a corrections from a good journal. It is from Sage Publisher. Okay, and they told that okay, you have written very good way in your methodology, but where are your scale of measurement of your questionnaire? You know that they asked me to put the research variables with the sources. You see that independent variables, I have used 6 dimensions. Okay, then actually 2 dimensions, it will be 2 dimensions, I have written mistakenly. So each of the dimension contain 9 items, 18 items. So I have given the justification, sources. So you have to given the sources. Even it is suggested always that after sources you have to give the reliability value. That means what is the value of CR? That means after collecting the pilot test, after completing the analysis, what is your reliability, and what was the other reliability? It is always suggested. So the another column can be the reliability values. Okay, so you have to mention that how you have taken the items of your variables and which sources you have covered. This is the scale measurement. And then this scale measurement can be 2 types. One, as earlier I mentioned, adaptive or adaptive, whatever you have used. Sample size. This is a really good, this is really a controversial issue for the both qualitative and quantitative. But my suggestion, whatever the qualitative, it may even happen that you can taken only the 4 to 9, even 15 respondents are enough to conduct a good, quality research until reaching the saturation point. This is for the qualitative research. But if it is quantitative, and if you have an intention to use some updated software like structural equation modeling, then 150 to 400 is the best. But sometimes 100 to 150 sample or respondents are enough if it has good reliability over 0.90. 0.90, then even you can collect only 150 respondents. These are enough. But you know that to get the high reliability using 100 respondents are very difficult. That's why Higher et al. 2016, even 2006, 2017, 2018, Ringel, they also suggested that 150 to 400 is the most appropriate sample size. Okay, major components of data analysis. Okay, just I'm giving the quantitative research. So in future, if we do another webinar on qualitative, then we can discuss about the qualitative tools or components. So major components, whatever it is, you have to give as it is thesis. So everything you have to clear. You know that sometimes it depends on the number of pages. In UPM, the thesis, in my case, actually the thesis was including the references, 240 pages. So when you will identify the missing values, outliers, normality, demographic profile, factor analysis, all of these things will make unnecessary tables. So you can give it as an appendix, because the pages of appendix will not count in UPM. Okay, but other universities, I don't know about this thing. Maybe the thesis, there is no page limitation, even some of the universities. So if it is not, then you can put all of the tables inside the thesis, then you can do it. But whatever it is, you know the examiners about the missing values, outliers, normality of data, demographic profile, factor analysis. This is really important. Okay, but another thing is that measurement model, structure model, mediation model. This is really important. And if you have an intention to use covariance based structure equation modeling, this measurement model is very, very, very important. But for partial least square structure model, actually this measurement model actually sometimes is not effective, because PLS is actually used for the not normal levels, even less respondents, that PLS is PLS SEM is applicable. And if your intention is to make your findings more generalized, then you can go for the PLS SEM. Okay, but if your intention is to use the theoretical assumptions, to check the theoretical assumptions or to test the theoretical assumptions, you can go for SEM. So these are things you have to cover the analysis part. Okay, but you know that this is not easy thing, because we need several webinars to conduct each of these things. Okay, like SPSS, CBSEM, okay, PLS SEM, we need sometimes. Okay, but these are the major components you have to cover in order to design your result and discussion part, especially. Now discussion, you see that discussion part should be separated part. You know that in UPM actually it is always encouraged to do the students to make the discussion part separate. Okay, previously it was suggested that when you will get your data, and after getting the data, you can discuss everything after the analysis part. But it is always suggested now in UPM that you have to design your discussion part as a separate part. So what are the things you need to put in the discussion part? You know that this part is really, really important, not only for thesis but also for the publication. And if you do not have the good justification of your result, good explanation of your results, of your findings, there is no value of your thesis and there is no value of your research work. Okay, that's why most of the people actually, when go for the publications, they will got the rejection only for this part. That means they are not more focusing on the discussion part. Okay, fine. Just I have designed this discussion part in one way, but when you will put in your thesis, you have to elaborate more and more. Okay, just another thing is that there is a misconception in between the students that if my hypothesis being rejected, maybe my thesis will also be rejected. This is not really true. Okay, in case of mine, I got the 3 major of my objectives or my hypothesis were rejected, and I was too frustrated because I have collected my data, and so within 3 months, 4 months, And after analyzing that, I got my the hypothesis being rejected, and I went to my supervisor's room. And one of my supervisors told me that don't worry about the rejection. Just look for some good explanations or good, justifications why your hypothesis or why your findings have been rejected. You see that my number 5 hypothesis, that the hypothesis was that work-family balance might mediate the relationship. Theoretical assumption also said that work-family balance is a resources, and that might mediate the relationship between independent and dependent variable. But when I calculate my result, I found that actually these findings violates the theoretical assumptions, because theory said that it can mediate, but I got it does not mediate. So what will be my situation? The situation is that you have to search the similar findings of other researchers, whether other researchers have found the same findings or not. In case of mine, actually, I didn't find any of the literature support, because these findings is totally new. That's why I have to give the strong justification, strong explanations why this thing happened. And you know that the most interesting thing, that I was too worried about these findings, but only due to these 3 findings, my examiners were too happy. They think that if all of your hypotheses are accepted, what is your new contribution? What are your new contribution? Because previous researchers also found the same thing, and you are also getting the same thing. So what are the values? But this is my new, totally new value, because these findings actually didn't get any of the researchers. So when other researchers will start to work, actually when they will find these types of results, they will cite me. So this is purely my contribution, okay, based on the findings and discussion of the findings. So you have to give a proper justification, proper explanation of your findings. This is called discussion of the findings, and you have to write maybe 10 to 11 pages based on your hypothesis, right, in the discussion of the findings. Implications and theory. I have designed my thesis actually theoretical implications and practical implications. And for your kind information, you can also give the methodological implications. Just few days ago, one of my papers from Emerald Publishers, they told that, okay, fine, you have already given theoretical contributions and implications. Practical, we are very happy about your contributions and implications, but could you please let us inform about us that what is your methodological implications? Okay, if possible, you can also give some methodological implications. So whatever it is, but these are the main implication or contribution. You have to write, you have to let to know the examiners what is your theoretical contributions and practical contributions. You know that if you cannot give the appropriate pictures of the theoretical contributions or practical contributions, the examiners will not happy. Okay. Then limitations and area for future research. This is another important thing. Okay, limitations means when you will, put the limitations in your thesis, definitely you have to give some suggestions how to overcome from these limitations. You should inform to the other researchers. Okay, limitation means actually in my thesis I didn't cover these things. This is my limitations. But in my limitations, other researchers' responsibilities is to overcome from these limitations. So I may suggest them that if you can follow this thing, you can just overcome from this limitation. Just I can give one example, that I only in my thesis, I only focused on the educational institution and the private universities, especially for the private universities. So in future, if any researcher wants to conduct a research, he or she can make a good comparison between public university and private university, or educational institution and other sector. Okay, so this is my suggestion. So when you will put the limitation, you must give the suggestion for the future researchers. This is really, really important. Then conclusion. So when you will write the conclusion, if you follow these 4 things, that interpret and summaries of your findings. So you have to give a appropriate or a clear picture about your findings and interpretation. And tell them what the findings. That means you need to give the strong explanation, a strong justification of your findings. What the findings mean. That means what the findings represent. Then tell something about contributions, like a little bit of theoretical contributions and practical contributions. And if it is possible, you can give some recommendations here also. Last one is limitations and area for future research. That means in this part, your major limitations and area for future research, you should inform to the, examiners. And if you can if you can cover these 4 important things, end of the day, you will get a good conclusion. And citations and references, you know that you have to follow the appropriate citations and references methods. You know that, and whatever you have cited in the body of your part, make sure that your references, that things are in the references. In my PhD thesis, actually, you know that I missed almost 25 references. Okay, you know that why? Because it exceeds the more pages, 241 pages. So 240, due to this, I just removed some references. I thought that the examiners will not be able to find it out, but you know that the examiners find it out already. They told that you have almost missed some 15 to 20 references. Then I just let them clear, doctor, just if I put that 15 or 20 references, one pages will exceed. Then they told, oh, no problem, you can just hello, you can just make the problem statement or background studies a little bit of shorter. Okay, whatever it is, you have to depend on the guidance of the UPM. As far I know that UPM actually following 5 types of references like APA, Harvard, MLA, Chicago. These are the things. So you have to depend on a university guidelines. All the authority has actually want what the types are appropriate for your thesis. And this is the questions session. So please, you can send your question based on the today's session to the post in the chat box. I think I have already covered all of this thing. And thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mizan, for your wonderful presentation. And I'm sure that our participants will be very highly beneficial and they can write their thesis very easily with the informations. So now we are going to proceed to our Q&A session. So far, we got some very interesting questions, and I am reading one by one. Our first question is, how do we know about weak keyword?
Sorry, can you do?
How we know about the weak keyword? Weak and strong keyword.
You weak keywords. That's very good. That as earlier I committed that I will show you, but I forgot. That's a very good question. How you can identify the weak keyword? You know that. Just I can share my own experience. When I went for the proposal defense or comprehensive exam, then I wrote the job satisfaction, just dependent variable. Okay, you know that this job satisfaction, though it's a very good variable, but compared in PhD job satisfaction, one of the examiners told that no, job satisfaction is very weak variable. Rather, selecting the job satisfaction, you can go for the well-being, subjective well-being. You know that well-being can be objective and subjective, so you have to more specific, like subjective well-being, because job satisfaction, family satisfaction, life satisfaction, all of the variables covered by the well-being. So in comparing to well-being, job satisfaction is a weak variable. So you have to identify such variable which are actually more used in a research work. That is actually called weak variable.
Okay, thank you, sir. I hope she will get the answer. And then our next question is, should we mention also the problem of the research and gap on the introduction too? I think I can give the answer this one. We have to mention the problem and gap into the introduction, right?
In the introduction part.
Yeah, it's the heart of the introduction.
Research. Okay. Heart of the introduction.
Okay, then we go our next question. Could you please give me some advice for my problem? I read a lot to find topics exactly in my field, but the problem that it's too expand and I'm stuck when I'm read. My supervisor just tell me to read and take a lot of time without result. Could you help me in some advice here?
Yes, this is really interesting thing. You know
common
that
phenomena.
When you will go for
it's a common
phenomena. When you will go for the experts or examiners or the supervisors, actually you know that it's not the fault of the supervisor. They are very busy. Okay, you are not the only student, because as far I know that in Malaysia, each of the supervisor actually have almost 10 PhD students. Okay, so it's not easy to supervise all of the students. That's why they always suggested to read. Okay, fine. If your research problem statement is very expand, then you can depend on these 3 important things like context, content and theory. You know that the tips and reminder that 3 to 5 gaps are enough for PhD, but in masters sometimes 2 or 3, even 1 gaps are enough for master's level, but PhD level 3 to 5 gaps. So if you go for is the area and do researchable or less attention has been given in this particular area. If you can identify, yes, less attention has been given in this particular area, that means there is an opportunity to conduct research. So one gap. Another gap is content. So you need to identify the issues, whether the issues are more usable or less usable. If you find that, yes, still most of the researchers didn't focus on these particular issues, so this is a gap. Also content gap. And if you can just focus on theory, and if you be able to identify the theoretical gap, I think you have already identified the 3 gaps, like context gap, content gap, and theoretical gap. So no need to go for expand. Just your fundamental objective will be to identify the 3 types of gaps. And if you be able to identify the 3 types of gaps, I think your problem statement will be very good. I think, sir, it will help you, sir.
Okay. Then our next question is, what is the minimum sample size to run exploratory factor analysis? What is the minimum sample size?
Minimum sample size. You know that before going to the exploratory factor analysis, you need to know first why exploratory factor analysis. Okay, you know that exploratory factor analysis is nothing. It's just the data reduction. Okay, dimension reduction. When you will go for the SPSS, there is no word like factor analysis. It's like the dimension reduction. Okay, now in order to increase, it is the secret. Okay, though my research today is not the statistical part though, but I'm telling it, it's the secret issue. You know that exploratory factor analysis is actually helpful in order to increase the reliability of your research variables. Okay, for example, because when you will run your exploratory factor analysis, it will give you some reliability values. And if you find that this construct, actually this item contains low factor loading, and if you can delete it, then you will get more reliability. Now the question is that, is it possible to use EFA and CFA in a same thesis? And if it is possible, then how many sample sizes required? Usually after collecting you data from the pilot test, for the pilot test, factor analysis is more appropriate. You know that. So after maybe 40 to 60, even 100 respondents are enough to use the EFA, exploratory factor analysis. But my experience by because I attend workshop professors like Rahman, so they said don't try to use EFA and CFA in a same thesis. If you have intention to use EFA and CFA, there are so many criteria. Okay, these are the issues. The question was how many respondents. So 40 to 100 respondents are enough to use EFA. Order to abstract or research variable more leverage.
I think the internet a bit unstable.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. Now clear. Okay. So our next question is, can we use SPSS?
I have already finished the answer.
Okay, can we use the SPSS for mediation? Can we use SPSS for mediation?
Okay, it's possible. Using mediation, using SPSS is possible. You have to download extra 2 softwares. Those softwares are free, like GPower as well as Process Macro. Okay, so if you install this GPower and Process Macro in your laptop, then automatically it will be connected with your SPSS software. Okay, then you can use mediation using your SPSS. Okay, it's possible. It's possible, sir.
Okay, before we go into the next question, we want to acknowledge that we know that this session is very short, limited time, and it's impossible to cover all the chapters. So we have planned to organize separate sessions in like the methodology, okay, also the how to write the conclusion, how to interpret the result. So we have planned, and we also organize very soon. And then our next webinar will be very soon. It's regarding to the soft skill, and it's regarding to the how to write the email. So we will let you know about the date and times in our pages. So keep your eyes on our pages for the further notice. So our next question is how to develop my alternative title and which chapter should focus first, chapter 2 or chapter 3? How to develop my alternative title?
Okay, I got the idea, I got the question, but it depends on the chapters. If the third chapter is your methodology, that's the different thing, but you know that what you mean, second and third chapter. But my suggestion is that you have to depend on more literature review, because if you do not start the literature review, then it's not possible to even write the introduction part, especially for the problem statement. Then just I can give you an example. When actually I went to the UPM, all of my supervisors actually suggested me to draw a literature matrix, Then one day I asked, doctor, what is literature matrix? Literature matrix means that there are some tables and columns. You know better than me that one part is writers, title, then discussion, then findings, limitations. So my suggestion is that you should start with literature review. And if you do not have good control over literature review, then it's not possible to write even introduction, because what you want to write in introduction, all of the things you have to depend on literature review part. Okay, so simultaneously you can start with introduction and literature review, but you have to depend more on literature review in order to design your introduction part very effective way.
So we got another question, how to motivate a respondent to fill up the questionnaire spontaneously with understanding the significance of the questionnaire?
Okay, that's a very good question. You know that usually when we will disburse the questionnaire, actually we are not giving anything to the respondent. So it's they're like they have just willing, if they want they can do it, if they do not want they can easily do it. So you know that you can just make the respondents very happy that okay, let them inform that your questionnaire should be too precise and short, and your statement should be very clear. Okay, like that. One of my friends and colleagues, actually, when he completed his PhD, actually, who used almost 200 items in his questionnaire. Okay, when the respondents, or when the authors send the questionnaire to you or even to me, is it possible to give that 1 hour and 2 hours to complete a questionnaire? No. That's why it is always suggested that please try to keep your items as less as possible, but not less than 5 for each variable. Okay, and each of the sentence of the item should be too specific, and try to make it too short. Okay, and to make them interesting, and if possible, then you should give some prize also. That, for example, I gave one pen, a simple pen, to the respondents to fill up the questionnaire. Okay, I think, and try to keep your questionnaire as much as possible, so that the respondents can fill it up 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, because it's like a free questionnaire, like it's not like project based, because PhD is like your own work. Okay, and just I want to give an example. When I fill up from US project, they gave me $14, but we are not anything. So your questionnaire should be precise, interesting, as well as you design your questionnaire in such a way the respondents can fill it up within 15 minutes. You can just give them some motivational like pen or any other thing. So I think the respondents will be happy.
Yeah, I can share my experience in Malaysia. Basically, we use the KFC token also, and also we have to save some money from the initial of the PhD and masters. Okay, those who have no fund, so we have to keep the safe for the future. And our next question from the Shahrul Islam, unit of analysis is.
And another thing is this pandemic. You know that during this pandemic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, can.
Yes. Unit of.
Okay. If the unit of
analysis is the organization.
Okay. What will be the sample size? What will be the sample size?
Okay. If the unit of the sample size is an organization, it depends on the nature of the, for if the unit of analysis is organization and you responded is only one from the one organization, the sample size is different. Okay, for example, that in Bangladesh there are some organizations like garments industry or for example, but each of the garments industry you collect the data only for the managers, then the sample size actually is 100 or something. But it is suggested that it depends on, for example, that 150 garments industry, that means unit of analysis. It is suggested that if it is unit of analysis, even if you can collect 20 to 25% of the total unit of analysis, it's okay to conduct your research. But if it is happened that your unit of analysis is a garments organization, but you have intention to collect the collect the data from the two peoples, then you know that your sample size is little bit of different. I think if the unit of analysis is organization, if you can collect 20 to 25% of the total industry, then it's possible to run your organization, analysis or thesis.
Okay. So our another question is, what is the role of literature metrics plays in the documentation of review of literature? And can it be linked to the main literature review section? The role of literature metrics.
Okay, the role of literature metrics has a lot of roles actually. And if you can design a literature metrics appropriately, it will help you to identify the gap clearly. Okay, and if you cannot design the literature metrics, you will not be able to find out the gaps clearly, because you know that this is the theoretical section, theoretical webinar. And if I can have the practical webinar, I have already designed another sort of my slides that how you can design the literature metrics and how you can identify the gaps from that particular literature matrix. So inshallah, in future, if you have any intention to be the part of the other webinars, then you can get it. But end of the day, literature metrics will help you to identify the gaps clearly.
I think literature metrics will be included in the proposal section, okay, but not the main thesis.
Main thesis, no. Main thesis, no.
Yeah.
Main thesis, no.
Synthesizes from the literature metrics. Yeah. So, so our last question, I think this one, Dr. This one is in quantitative, we need to include hypothesis, but what about the qualitative? So in qualitative research, should we need the hypothesis?
Yes. No. In this is a very good question. In quantitative, you need some hypothesis. Okay, how you can develop the hypothesis based on the assumptions. But in quality, it is called proportion. Okay, you have to depend on theoretical proportion. That's why in the qualitative research, you have to more depend on research question. You have to more depend on research question, and research question and objective will come from the theoretical proportion in spite of hypothesis development. Whatever it is in quantitative, it is called the hypothesis. In quality, it's theoretical proportion.
Okay. Okay. So another question, can we take?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. I have a question regarding title. If we select title first, but cannot get the related articles and variables, so what do we need to do first?
Yes, this is very good question. You have already selected the titles and you will not get the articles. Don't try to do it. You should collect the articles. Okay. Then based on the articles, you should try to select some key variables, and based on the variables, you have to design your title. You know that in PhD or master's level students, we are more focusing on title. But one of my supervisors, especially for the main supervisor, he suggested that don't try to focus more on title, because during your final viva, you are not certain whether your title is fixed or not. Because in our UPM, there is another committee. You will be surprised to hear that maybe you are just hearing this thing the very first time. There is a title committee in UPM. Okay, maybe you have already passed your viva and your title has been fixed, but until when the title committee will not approve your title, they will not give you the Senate letter. Okay, so don't more focus on title, but more focus on your key variables, because if you have the clear idea about more variables, then you can design in your title in the different way, and end of the day title committee will help you, or the examiners will help you to design your title more accurately. I think no need to be worried too much about the title.
Yeah, we can fix it after the Viva also.
Even Viva, yeah, even after the Viva.
I know your case also. So then,
yeah.
Last question is how to link the idea of literature review logically with a case?
Sorry?
How to link the idea of literature review logically with a case study?
Sorry, actually, I have no idea about the case study because I didn't publish anything about the case study. I'm really sorry for that, but I will try to cover it. After the webinar, I will search it in the internet. Yeah, I will search it the most, internet, and I will let you know, inshallah.
It's more related to the qualitative research. Okay.
Yeah.
So then how to know the websites are reliable to cite?
Okay. So before collecting collecting your article, you have to really depend on some good, publishers. Okay, like you can check using the Schemago. There is a software. Then you can put the article, name of the title of the journal, and Schemago. If it is think that yes, Schemago is showing some result, then you have to depend on it. This is the reliable publishers. In order, there are some renowned publishers like Emerald, Sage, Rootless, like Inter Science, Willy. These are the reliable sources. So you have to depend on these articles. You know that this is very, very important. Without getting the good articles from the good sources, you will not get a good, idea about your work. So there are some other softwares like Schemago is one of the most important softwares. Then another is I forgot the name, maybe Calculates or something. Calculates or something. You can go for that things. And you have to depend on some renowned publishers. Don't go for the predatory publishers or predatory journals to collect the articles.
Thank you. We think we cover all the questions. So at this moment, I request all the participants to switch on the video so we can take some snaps for our record purpose. Okay. Please switch on your videos if possible. Those.
Imtiaz, can you off the slide? Because
okay. Mizan bhai, please.
Yeah, I will send it to. I will send the slides to you, Imtiaz, and Imtiaz will send it to you, inshallah. All of you.
Okay, Mizan bhai, can you stop sharing the screen? Because
sorry.
I have to take some.
Stop. Okay.
Yeah, what about the video? What about the recording? Can we get the recording?
Yeah, we share in our YouTube channel.
Hello?
We will share in our YouTube channel all the recording.
Sir,
okay.
Sir, Assalamualaikum. Can I ask one question, please?
Okay, can we take a snap? One second. Okay, thank you. Done. Okay, if you have any question, just write down in our WhatsApp group. We will try to convey to our facilitator. Okay. So at the end, thank you so much to all the participants.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Asif. Still, you are here. It's a blessing for us. So see you in the next program. Until then, stay safe. And I'm concluding to this session here. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Imtiaz. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Dr. Mizanur Rahman. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you and assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Thank you so much, Mizan bhai and Imtiaz.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mizan bhai and Imtiaz.
I think Tariq bhai.
It was really a helpful and very good session.
Right? Okay. We will have a lot of session in future.
Really a good session.
Yeah, we are waiting
Then
for
it's a hard job. It's a hard job that you explain now 2 hours without any rest. May Allah bless you.
Thank you.
Stay.
every month we will try around
Thank
2
you,
programs.
Imtiaz, for organizing a nice session. Thanks,
Thank you, Apu.
Imtiaz.
Thank you, Apu.
Stay safe.
Stay safe. You too.
Okay, Assalamualaikum.
Here.
Assalamualaikum.
Walaikum assalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so very much. It's really a great class. Thank you so very much.
Please stay with us and provide some feedbacks. Share our programs. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Rahman.
Thank you, brother.
It's
I
all
hope
about
ONISM
you.
will facilitate like this session. That will be very helpful.
Yeah. Thank you, Tariq Bhai, for your compliment. Inshallah, we will have a session with you very soon.
Inshallah.
Okay, Bhaiya. Okay, I can conclude.
Yes.
Okay, Assalamualaikum.
Okay, Assalamualaikum, everyone.
Assalamualaikum.